Right, now we've got the rocker bars all installed along with the push rod tubes. Now we do the initial valve timing. What you do is, this is number 1 cylinder. You make sure that the finger on the rotor is pointing to number 1. Yeah. Timing notches correspond. And so now you set your tappets. I just set them with a minimum clearance of about 0.3 millimeters, right? And then once you've done that, number 1, go around anti-clockwise, half a turn. Now you see I've marked it 180, and now you can do cylinder number 2. All right. Then you go around anti-clockwise again, half a turn, and now you can do number 3, and then anti-clockwise, round again, half a turn, and then you can do number 4. Right. Now, best thing to do is to go around it a few times because it'll take everything to settle in. I'm just setting it at 0.3 for the moment. It'll rattle like anything when it starts up, and then we set it all up again when we retorque the heads down and all the rest of it. Okay, there's no reason now why you shouldn't fit the rocker boxes and generally make the thing look tidy. Okay, there we go. Right, rocker boxes. These have been cleaned up and painted. What you do is you apply grease around here and then fit the gasket. Don't do anything else. Don't use any magic compound or anything similar. Then they cause problems. And then when you put the box on, only go around one way. You've already fitted your spring. Make sure the spring is in place and that it's round the right way. Okay, grease them, put them on, lock them up, that's it. There we are, rocker box on, wire always looking sad. Not smiley, but sad. And then once you've got it on and you've greased it, grease the thing and just seat it down. Then like that, you won't have any problem with oil leaks. You'll be taking this off again after a short time because once the engine has been run for an hour, everything has to be reset. Okay, same thing the other side, obviously, and then we can start looking at the rest of it. Okay. Now fit the bottom tins. I use these socket cap screws with big washers. Holds everything together. Don't forget you've cleaned all the threads out, so it's going to make it nice and easy for you now. Right, so that's the bottom tins on. Do everything loosely. I'm now going to put the top tins on, and we're just going to start to see where everything, how it all fits together. Okay. Okay, before we put this top piece of tinware on, I'm going to put the oil cooler tower on. Put in the 2 oil seals. I bed them down with a little bit of blue. Same thing on the inside. Put it down, crank it down, nip it up, and that'll do for the moment. Okay. Right, so that's the oil cooler tower on. And being dog leg, it's offset from the fan housing. We're putting some self-adhesive draft excluder around here to improve the performance, to get more air going through the system. Now all I've got to do is just put the tinware on, which I've tried out once already. And then that'll be about it for the day. Here we go. Okay, so here's the engine as it was built out last night. We've now got all the oil cooler tower on and all bolted down. Remember, you've got to do these early and then you put the tinware on. Okay, Right, so now we are going to set up putting all the gaskets for the oil filler tower, and also for the fuel pump stand. Here's all the bits down here, and then we just set it all up nice and loosely. Put all the gaskets in place. Use the right gaskets. Said this so many times. There's the gaskets you're going to be needing. There's lots of extra gaskets in these kits because they basically fit everything. You're going to want some gasket compound. I'm going to be using some insulating, self-adhesive insulating foam, which goes around the outside of the oil cooler to make sure that enough air goes through it, or more air goes through it. There we are. Well, I'll get all that set up and then we'll show you where we're getting from there. Okay, so now we have the oil cooler tower with its foam all the way around. And we've got the fuel pump all nicely set up. And we've got the generator support, oil filler, everything is in place. Right, all the tinware is still slightly slackened off. Remember, all the studs have been cleaned out because now we're going to start looking at putting together the inlet manifold. Now, the inlet manifold has got rubber couplings here, which connect up to here. These must be airtight, otherwise you get an inlet leak at the manifold and the thing will just not run properly. This tube must be cleaned out. This is the heat riser tube, and it wants to be cleaned out all the way through so you can blow compressed air through it and no more rubbish comes out. Because the heat comes up from the engine and warms up this bit that's in here. That's effectively the plenum chamber, and it warms the fuel as it comes down. Okay, so then we're going to do a trial offer of this up now, get everything lined up, and then we'll start looking at putting on the generator housing. Okay. Okay, so that's the inlet manifolds nipped up, and we've made sure that all the rubber bungs are nicely made. Now we look at the tinware, and a good little trick is this is going to be the accelerator cable tube, which is going to have to go through there. So what you do is you put two rubber bungs on the tube as it passes through here, and then that way it won't flop about. You can't do this after it's put in place because the oil cooler is in the way. Okay, we'll set that up and try it out in place. Okay, so you've seen the engine built up so far, and this evening we're just going to do a quick bit of work on the carburettor, which sits here on the inlet manifold. The top of the manifold's been cleaned, and we're going to mount a dry gasket on that eventually. And there's the throttle cable tube with the two rubber bungs inside, so that you can adjust the tube and it won't fall through. It's quite handy. You can put a bit of a cut bit of tube as a stopper to stop any air getting through as well if you really want. Okay, so carburettor. Here we are. Good old Solex 34 Pick 3, as used on loads of stuff. Okay, what you do is, this is just going to be a quick carb overhaul, right? This is not a quick carb clean. This is not a full overhaul. This is just basically assuming that all the settings weren't too far off, and we're just going to make sure that we will be able to do stuff to it when it's on the engine. Right, okay, first thing you do is you take off the little spring, then you undo the 5 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, and lay them out nicely. Then you can take the top off. The top just comes straight off. There is a gasket. There's the gasket. Folks, you're looking a little bit tired. So there we are. Right, now you're looking at the inside of the carb. Right, now basically you only need a pair of tweezers and a few other little tools. Right, out comes the float holder. Here comes the float itself. Ooh, look all nice and mucky and gungy in there. Right, with sort of rusty stuff. Now, one thing you always want to do is you want to check that the main jet is clean. And the main jet is that one. That one there, in brass. Everything important in the carburettor is made of brass. All the rest of it is just the usual aluminium housing. Right, and to get to this, you need 13mm spanner. And you go in through here, undo that. This has a very, very fine flat washer on it, so don't lose it and don't tip it upside down and silly things like that. Right, okay, that's that. Now, you put your screwdriver through, and you can now unscrew the main jet. Somebody's already been in here with a gorilla screwdriver by the look of it. And then we take the little pair of tweezers and pull out the jet. And despite having been got out with a screwdriver, the jet itself, I actually cleaned it, but it's clean as a whistle. Okay, don't poke this out with wire. If you've got a little ultrasonic bath, that's good. Otherwise, leave it to soak in for 24 hours if need be in thinners, and blow it out with the compressor, and it should really be clean and so on. Right, okay, other important bits are all this dust and muck has got to be come out. You've got to blow all the jets out. This little one unscrews, you can blow down there. Right, these have been connected on round the wrong way. Somebody's been going silly. Right, the other things are just a quick overview on the carb. Oh yes, right, okay. You're going to check that your solenoid cutoff works. 17mm spanner on there. Thing unscrews. Right, and we're going to check with a battery, that when you switch power to it, this thing pulls up, dunk, like that. So that when it switches off, it goes dunk, like that, pops out and shuts off the fuel supply to the carb. Why does it do that? Because this sort of carburettor can have something of a tendency to do what's called dieseling on. Right, the other two ones to look at is that little tiny screw is your CO screw, and that one is your idle air screw. And what you can do, if you're feeling bold, is you can mark that, count how many turns it is to get down to the bottom, wind it out, have a look to see if everything is good, see if it's got the little rubber on the end of it. Some of them do, some of them don't. And there we are. Otherwise, after it's been cleaned, it just gets put back together, the underside of the thing. Oh, by the way, when you're standing things like that, always use keeper nuts. Don't sort of crush the studs in the vise or anything, because you'll be struggling otherwise. Right, okay, a little drop of oil spindle here and there and so on, so on, so on, and that's good to go. There we go. Right, okay. Just to resume then, so we've been into the carburettor, we've had the screws off and undone the spring and all the rest of it and so on, so on, so on. Been in, taken out the main jet, clean that, clean inside the bowl, clean inside everywhere else, clean inside the little filter tube. We've made sure these screws move. This one here, the one that is the idle, and this little one down here, which is the CO. We've also had this unscrewed, 17mm socket. We've tested it against the battery, just earth out the body, and that's the live source. And the little solenoid arm goes tick, 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 like that. There we go. What else have we done? And then when you torque the screws up, you do them up nicely and use the rule of 2, because lots of Volkswagen things have got odd numbers. So use 1, miss 1, 1, miss 1, 1, miss 1, once. That way everything tightens up nicely. Okay, little dollop of machine oil here and there, and that's it, ready to go on. I use an ordered separately, nice big thick card gasket, because quite frankly, even in the better kits, the ones that come, I don't think they're up to much. They're not dear, and they make life that much easier. Mount the carburettor onto the inlet manifold dry. Don't use goop. Thank you. Right, so here we are. We're now going to start looking at putting the exhausts on. Now this being a Buggy engine, it's got Buggy exhausts, so while they're quite nicely made, it's going to be a little bit of a fit to get them. So you put new exhaust gaskets on. What I do is I go around it the first time and just nip it up, and if it looks as though I'm going to need to use any sort of exhaust paste, this sort of stuff, I do, and we're going to end up putting exhaust paste. Here's this little gasket, you see, it's the little gasket that looks like this. This is for the heat riser, and there's quite a bit of a gap there, so I might have to make that up, even with 2 gaskets if need be. And then here's the tube that's going to have a little bit of gasket compound put on it, and then hopefully the rear will then slide on. And again, here's the ordinary exhaust gasket. This is the one with the new stud. So I'll get that prepared up, and then you can see how it all goes together. Okay. What makes this exhaust a little bit unusual is that you can mount it on one side then the other. Normally you've got to be able to line everything up because you've got all your... Right, now we've just dropped in the distributor. We put the little spring in that was missing inside here. We dropped the distributor down. The distributor clamp was broken. This is some weird old distributor, but this is what the customer brought. So, and this is what's called an SVDA, right? Single vacuum diaphragm advance, because there is one pipe coming out of the vacuum chamber, which goes up and is fed off the vacuum on the carb just here. Sorry, there's a lot of sunlight today. Very sunny, lovely weather. Right, okay. So, and when you put the dizzy in, as you know, we've got it all set up on top dead center. Here we are. We've done all this. And so that we knew with the old distributor that I was using, this is what's called an 009 distributor. This doesn't have a vacuum advance. It just has a condenser and so on. And it might be better on this engine, in fact, because an 009 is good for engines that are going to roar. But anyway, we'll see that on startup. Now, there is a little notch just there. Just there. So I've just lined that up with the centre of the rotor arm, pointing to number 1 plug, and that'll do for a startup, because what we're going to do is we're going to turn and advance and retard the ignition when we've got the engine running, and we've got a stroboscope flashing to be able to pick up these marks, okay, which I will highlight in tip X. Okay, anything else to mention? This is too ratty, this has got to be changed, and then eventually once we've got this on, we can fit the top on, and then we can start looking at fitting the coil and all the rest of it. And then that's it, pretty much done then. Okay. Okay, so now we've got the engine set up on the engine starting stand. As you can see, the whole thing's on a nice sturdy frame. And what we've been doing now, first of all, you see here you've got your battery, and here you've got your starter motor on your bell housing. And the first thing you do is with no spark plugs in yet, don't put any spark plugs in yet, is you then connect up maybe here an oil pressure gauge, and which the oil pressure gauge goes where your oil pressure switch normally goes, and you go around and check the compressions on all 4 of the cylinders. Can you just hit the start button, please, Steve? Here we go. And again, go on. Okay, there we are. That's what you should be reading on new cylinders. Over 10 bars, £150 per square inch. That's fine. Okay, next thing to do now is I'm just going to check that when I switch my ignition circuit on, that I do have power at the points, And then once we've established that, I'm going to put the spark plugs in with a little bit of copper grease on the threads. We're going to set the thing up, and then we're going to put a little petrol reservoir on it, and we're just going to see if it'll start. Okay. Right, well, here we are. Here is the engine now set up on the stand. We've been through the initial phase of cranking it over and over and over and over and over with no plugs in, and wait until the oil pressure comes up nice and quickly, and the oil pressure is read on this gauge here. Okay. Incidentally, on the back, so here we've got the bell housing, we've got the starter motor, we've got the battery, we've got a little console made up here, giving me an ignition on off. Ignition on gives me the tachometer light. This is the push button starter for the solenoid. See, just runs off. That's what kicks over the solenoid. The solenoid lever actuates, dunk, and it pushes the starter motor out to engage. Okay, well, enough of all that. Right, I have just run it just for a few seconds. And what's interesting, especially with these air-cooled engines, is that as they're warming up, by the way, the choke doesn't seem to work at all. As they're warming up, these pipes here, this pipe here, and this pipe here get really, really cold. And what happens is that the fuel, instead of being in a nice fine mist, turns to droplets. And when it turns to droplets, it gets very inefficient and it runs rich. So with a Vauxhall engine, what you do is start it up, just let it run for a couple of seconds, 30 seconds, then switch it off and let the temperature, these are just starting to get, that's just getting nice and warm, that. Let the temperature come through, and then when you start it up again, it'll run much better. Okay, so I will start it up now and let it run up to temperature. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set the timing. Remember, we've got the notches here, you see, and then we've got the notch here, and this will be able to be turned and moved, and when we get it spot on, we'll then be able to mark down here so that the timing is then recorded and so on. Okay, well, let's get on for a start-up, shall we? First time I've done this one-handed, so anyway, here we go. Right, so ignition on, push the button. That's the oil pressure. There's the RPM. It is quite noisy. Still warming up. RPM is a bit fast. Oil pressure is good. Right, we'll switch it off and let it warm through a bit more. There we go, oil pressure. That's fine. Okay, we'll let that warm through a bit more. And then when it comes up to operating temperature, I'll put the timing strobe light on. Okay, here we go.